I am Oğuzhan Özcan from Koç University Design Lab. In this video, we host a visionary design researcher, having pioneered many of the methods being used today, such as co-design. Liz Sender from Ohio State University. Hello, Liz.
Good morning and good evening.
Good evening to you as well. Liz, now the time our PhD student asking the question to you about their own curiosity. Let's start.
You've made speculations for how the activity of design might be like in the year 2044. Like basically you suggested a shift from design for people to design with people, and then eventually we will go on to design by people. This was in 2014, if I'm correct. So these speculations are targeted 30 years ahead. Now we are in 2021 and almost 1/3 of the time has passed. We recently experienced some sort of social shock. Of course, I'm talking about COVID-19, which most likely accelerated many changes in both design and how the world works, how we work. So considering the time has passed and the potential dramatic influence of the pandemic on our professional activities, how do you observe the progress towards your speculation? Do you see any progress or towards that change you suggested? And would you change anything about this future outlook of yours?
Thank you. First of all, I want to mention that I wouldn't say they were speculations. I call them aspirations. So it's more that I'm trying to describe what I hope might be able to happen. Not necessarily, you know what I mean? So I'm not necessarily covering the positives and the negatives, but I'm staying focused more on the positive side. So we'll call them aspirations. And I see two big changes in the direction of the aspirations. One of them I don't think has anything to do with COVID, and the second one absolutely has to do with COVID. And so the first one is in the paper, I described that I hope that everyone designs. And I see that regardless of COVID, that's definitely starting to happen, that there's a huge amount of interest in bringing design to everyone. And some of that we see in the rise of design thinking, which I think is sort of an unfortunate way, frankly, of bringing design to everyone, because it's, in my opinion, it's kind of a surface way of trying to add it on to adults in a way that's already too late to have much of an impact. But it does show that there's a huge interest in bringing design to everyone. So I'm hoping in the future that we are going to be seeing more bringing design to kindergarten, first grade, second grade, to bringing it to children early so that it can impact their thinking at a very early stage. And I see, I'm frankly really surprised at how much interest there is today in bringing co-design into applying for grants in all kinds of industries. So I didn't notice this even 5 years ago, but in the last 5 years, I've become involved in becoming the co-design expert, being brought into teams applying for huge amounts of grant funding from various organizations, because what they need to show is that they're applying co-design into their work. And so some of this is definitely in healthcare now. Co-design is becoming a requirement in order to get funding, but I'm also being involved in with groups of scientists studying fisheries issues and other socially oriented organizations. So I'm seeing not only an interest in bringing design to people, but also bringing co-design into all kinds of large challenges in the future. Now, the one, so the one aspiration that I talked about in the paper that I think has been directly impacted by COVID is this notion that in the future we'll be able to better understand the value of face-to-face versus online interaction, and that in the future we'll have a better sense of not which is better, but how do we utilize the highlights or the advantages of each. And I think because for the past year we've been forced online, I think we've not only learned a lot about how much we can get accomplished online, which is frankly kind of surprising and really enlightening, but also the impact, the social impact on people, and particularly children and parents with the children, trying to do their job and having the children learning at home. So there's been impact in both directions because of COVID, but I don't think we would have learned as much about what can really happen online had we not been forced to be online. And so I'm seeing now, I can think of 3 projects where the whole intent is to figure out how to make the best hybrid of face-to-face and online now that we've been through the forced online situation. So I have a graduate student doing this for social workers. So social workers who are meeting with, who used to meet with clients face-to-face in their homes. So he's looking at now, how do we blend those approaches, doing co-design with social workers to figure that out. Another student is doing that with parents, teachers, and children to figure out sort of the best hybrid learning environment. And I'm working with a team where we're aiming to get funding to do that for the intensive care unit at the hospital here. So I don't think without COVID, we wouldn't be able to even entertain those kind of explorations. So so that's the answer. Sort of one is ongoing and the other is definitely COVID related.
We are living in a time in which we are not only divided by social issues, but also by striking events such as COVID-19 pandemic. And normally one of the key points you emphasize in your works is to create a language for non-designers to take part in design processes. And with the current changes in how designers work as well, how do you think this language you are forming will be affected? And can we expect changes in how design research and practice are done in the future and in the present?
Yeah, I think that because of the, like I said previously, because there's so much interest now in bringing co-design to these large scale challenges that we face, that more and more will have the opportunity to bring non-designers into the design process at a very early stage. And another trend that I see in the large grant sort of the grant getting arena is the focus on transdisciplinarity, to bring together, and you guys would know this based on how your PhD program is set up, but to bring together different disciplines on equal footing, so that everyone is contributing to the exploration of the situation or the solution to the problem, but everybody is contributing differently, but I think with a shared language, particularly a shared visual language, a common language that isn't tied to, say, engineering, or it isn't tied to design, but it's just a language that people can use together. I think that I see that coming in the near future. And I also have had, during COVID, have had many experiences with student teams and outside of OSU teams using online applications such as Miro to do co-design in remote situations. And I would imagine that you've been using Miro or other whiteboard applications in that way. But I've also been working, one of my students was using, he's developed a co-design toolkit in virtual reality. So that it's, if you think of sort of Velcro modeling in physical space, what he's able to do then in a virtual environment is create objects within a few seconds. So creating a sphere and then making it bigger and changing its color and throwing it across the room. And so this is hugely exciting in terms of a language that non-designers, people from all disciplines can use, that if they can meet together in virtual reality and make on the spot, and then make together in that virtual space. I find that like a very, very exciting opportunity, particularly I think on these large projects where people are distributed around the world. And even once we can fly, coming together is expensive and time consuming. And so being able to create three-dimensional co-design spaces with toolkits and materials made of the common language, not made of the disciplinary language, the potential for that is huge.
For decades now, designers have been taught to consider human needs in their work in design practice. Naturally, as a designer, we can only design a good solutions if we understand needs and dreams of human beings for whom we are designing. On the other hand, nowadays, artificial intelligence has begun to form an important step to carry this human-centered design approach beyond the humans. Taken together, if we had achieved to understand AI needs and dreams, would it possible to design for them, or in the future, would AI prefer to use co-design methodology to create for human beings? In other perspective, what are the possible changes in your perspective towards the collective driven approach? How do you evaluate the beyond human-centered design approach as your predictions of the co-design?
The artificial intelligence, to me, is, I'm very worried about the applications of artificial intelligence in the future, mainly because the designers of artificial intelligence have not been a diverse group. And I worry a lot about the ability of artificial intelligence to be used to meet the needs and dreams of all kinds of people. So I think, and then just recently, within the last 2 days, apparently there's been a show on 60 Minutes. I did not see the show, but Google, the Google Artificial Intelligence group is being, the issue is that their facial recognition algorithms only do well on white male faces. And so there's huge parts of the population that are being, you know what I mean, that aren't a part of the algorithm, or they're not, you know what I mean, the algorithm isn't working well on all people. And the news has it, or Twitter has it, that part of the issue here was the issue with the algorithm not being able to detect all kinds of faces was brought up by, I think it was 2 Black female Google researchers who were subsequently let go from Google. And there was a lot of hoopla about that. And so now the issue is being talked about in the media, but the people who were let go from Google are not really being called into the conversation. So I was already worried about the use of artificial intelligence in these ways before this happened, but then in the last 2 days, it made me very scared. That if a company with the resources such as Google has is not able to address issues of diversity in looking into the future of a technology like AI, then no one, who is? If they're not doing it. Now, maybe because this has all happened, they'll change how things are done, but it's very, very scary to me to think that AI would play a huge role and would take this human-centered approach in the future. And also, I think that in terms of sort of empathy, or designing with empathy, or using empathy as part of the design process, I don't think that's adequate at all. That you can empathize with other ethnic groups or other genders or whatever, but that doesn't necessarily ensure that you'll meet their needs, because you can't really empathize with people for whom you have no connection. So I would say in the future of AI, co-design, where to me, empathy is like a very, very surface kind of level of including, addressing the needs of real people, but bringing the real people into the process at the beginning of the process is really the only way to make sure that we meet the needs of all the people. So I think until AI is really, the design teams behind it are diverse, and that the people that will be impacted by the AI are brought into the process as co-designers, it worries me what's going to happen with AI in the future. It's scary.
In research through design, prototypes can play many numerous roles. And as a prototyping kit designer myself, I wondered, how do you feel about prototyping during remote events like workshops or training sessions? And do you think that is it really possible to a group of people far away from each other to successfully engage co-design with similar or exact tools in hand?
Yeah, and I think that because of COVID, we've had to adapt, and we have found ways. And yes, I do think that co-designing online is possible and effective. It works with Miro as a whiteboard. It works well, but it's slower. In a way, you can't have large groups effectively co-designing. Some people don't immediately pick up how to use Miro. So my students have found sometimes that we have to move things around for people. Do you know what I mean? If they're creating something with a toolkit, which is not as good as doing it themselves. But Miro has other advantages, such as automatically recording, transcribing. You know what I mean? There's a lot of technological advantages there. And then as I was explaining with this VR co-design environment, that allows people to get together to co-design objects, environments. Even I think in the future, VR will be a co-design environment for exploring futures and enacting future scenarios in virtual spaces. So I think, but again, just because it works doesn't mean that we should put all our eggs in that basket, so to speak. So I'm very curious to explore the hybrid. What is what is the best of face-to-face? When do we really need face-to-face? What can we do online? Certainly we can bring together people across the world a lot faster and less expensively when we're in the virtual mode. So I think we need to explore the hybrid of both, but not go into a decision as to which is the best and which should we stick with. We should definitely combine them together.
Liz, thank you very much. This nice talk. I have a last question to you. As I see from all friends is asking you the question about the future, because you have such a big experience with companies and you read the future, maybe one of the rare person in our field. So my question is, there are some speculations. According to this speculation, a new direction period, new company-based feudal economies might be entered in 40, 50 years. If this is true, if this has happened, what do you think? Do you think collaborative thinking will matter in the future or not?
I think we will never, I think we're moving towards collaborative thinking and it will never go, you know what I mean? It will only become stronger because we have the social means of bringing people together with each other. So once you bring the people together, they have a voice. And I'm seeing now even people who didn't used to have a voice, people from other cultures and ethnic groups, the disabled population, the differently gendered populations, everybody has a voice and everybody can use that voice. So no, I don't think, I think it won't ever return to where it was, but it will only become more and more collaborative. And so this notion of collective dreaming then is the ability to unleash that creative collaboration from all the people, not just the people trained in design or engineering or those kinds of fields.
Thank you very much. In this episode, we hosted one of the pioneers in our field, Liz Fender from Ohio State University. Goodbye from Istanbul Koç University, Istanbul Studios. I'm Oğuzhan Özcan.